All right. So, Bobby, we'll give it over to you. Maybe I know you shared the bio that you do furnished rentals, and maybe share a little bit more about, what you want to share with us, and then we'll go from there. And let me know if
Sounds good.
you should have access. You should have the ability to screen share. So let me know if that works.
Let's see. I am looking for it. More.
Should be at the bottom.
Let's see. Mute, stop video, participants, chat, share screen. There we go.
There you go.
Perfect.
Mhm.
And I'll share. Give me just a moment. Present. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
All right. Do you see yourselves as well, or just the screen?
Both.
Okay. Hold on. Let's see. Maybe I can minimize. There we go. All right. So let's see. And you know what? I'll actually start recording. There we go. All right. So I think it's recording now. Thank you, everyone. I think at one point or another, we've met through these meetings. I told Sergey I was working on a course. I wanted to try to work on something so that people could take advantage of the cash flows through short-term rentals, main source being Airbnb. So I worked on a quick presentation. So I work for a nonprofit in the Sacramento area, and we have a few charter schools. And every year, for probably the last 3 years or so, I've done presentations for the students. And my very first year in time doing it, kids were like falling asleep. Kids were not paying very much attention at all, having none of their conversations. And towards the end of it, I closed and I said, oh, and my wife and I, when we purchased our 2 homes, and one of the students actually, he stopped me and he was quite upset. And he said, well, why didn't you start by telling us that you own 2 homes? I think they were so used to hearing and learning things that weren't really feasible for them. So I've learned to start presentations with going over some type of credentials. And that's what I'll do here. So on here, my rental experience, we own, I guess on bigger pockets I always talk about doors. So we own 6 doors. That's 2 single family homes, 1 fourplex. We're hoping to get to 7 by building an ADU in the back of one of our units. I have 2 co-hosted units that I co-host with actually a coworker of mine. Overall, these units collect about $15,000 a month in rents, gross $15,000. And then specific to Airbnb, so I've almost been hosting for 3 years. Had over 1,000 nights hosted. Most of my units are occupied at 95% more. We've had thousands of guests, thousands and thousands of guests. I don't have an exact number on it yet. And then a super host with 305 reviews, and we're at a 4.9, which is something I'm proud of considering the amount of guests that we've had in and out, the amount of units that we're starting to grow to. So this is what I mean, this is like some quick numbers for one of our fourplexes. So we bought our fourplex earlier this year. When you look at the numbers that are coming in for our 2 Airbnb units, unit 1 and unit 4, they're grossing about $2,100 a month. Our 2 traditional units are significantly less than that. But we knew when we were inheriting tenants that we would not take away their place to live. So if one day they decide to move on out, we'll definitely convert those to Airbnb. But as you can see on here, the property's cash flowing even without having to flip the other 2 units. Let's see. So I'll just go through a quick agenda. I don't think it will take very long, but here's just some items that I figured I'd hit on. I'm really big on storytelling. I feel like it helps terms of take things in. So there will be some stories throughout this as well. So first story is my first experience with Airbnb. This is me and my son when he was almost a month old. We wanted to take our very first trip. And being new parents, first time parents, we didn't want to stay at a hotel because we were nervous that our son would be super loud and we'd disturb our neighbors and things like that. So it was the very first time we hopped on Airbnb. We decided to go to Mill Valley. We found an in-law unit that was listed on there, and it had actually been built for the homeowner's daughter. After she had a newborn, they wanted for their grandchild to come and spend time with them. So they created an ADU out there and decided to put on Airbnb a few years after it had been built. So that was the very first experience with Airbnb. I know that a lot of you know what Airbnb is. Some of you guys don't. Ultimately, Airbnb is a platform for connecting people who need a place to stay with people who have a place to stay. When you log on Airbnb, you'll see a lot of different options in terms of things that are listed. You'll see mansions. If you see on the right here, this is the home from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which I think last month or the month before that, they had talked about listing. Of course, people have homes, they have in-law suites. You'll see campers. I think a lot of times in the Bay Area, or even like if you're headed towards like Santa Barbara, you'll see a lot of empty lots where people allow others to camp on those spaces. Of course, you'll see rooms and then things as simple as couches for those that are willing to book them. So there's a few different ways in terms of how people host. I think the most common is probably ownership. So you have a property, you have a room, you list it on Airbnb. One of the things that I do, and I heard it earlier, there's co-hosting. So ultimately, it's when someone else owns the property and you can co-host it. So you split the profits that come from any type of Airbnb income. And then the whole master lease agreement is also known as Airbnb arbitrage, which is basically a sublease. You basically go to a property owner, you tell them that you'll sign a lease with them for however much per month. You'll schedule the amount of term and you let the owner know that you will be subleasing that property, whether it be on Airbnb, VRBO, a whole host of different options. So one of the things I really to note when it comes to arbitrage and master lease agreements is that those kind of agreements took a pretty big hit during COVID, at least when it initially started, because there was so much uncertainty. And a lot of people who had leases didn't want to continue paying on those leases if they weren't going to be able to continue to be profitable. And then it's also, I don't know how I messed this up, but that's supposed to say tough in high rent areas. So it is kind of tough to do arbitrage and master lease agreements with areas that have really high rents. One, because owners are already getting enough and don't want to list it, and then two, it kind of eats away at the potential profits from having your home on Airbnb or subleasing on Airbnb. All right, so another story. In the end of or middle July of 2017, my son was almost 1. We're going to be finishing up the rest of our leave. We scheduled a trip to go to Puerto Vallarta for 4 weeks. And maybe 2 or 3 days before the trip happened, my wife said, why don't we look into listing our home on Airbnb? We had a lot of fun staying last year. We'd actually stayed at a few more Airbnbs throughout the year. She said we could list our place. So 2 days before, we went and grabbed a lockbox. Our home was in Oak Park, so it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. We ended up putting all of our valuables or things that we didn't want people to access into my son's room in the back room. And then we listed the home as 1-bedroom, 1-bath. So let's see, for that 4-week trip that we were gone, we rented to a group of students that was visiting the UC Davis Med Center. And they stayed for 5 nights. And then we did 1 turn. And then we actually hosted a service member. So the person who stayed for the next 3 weeks, he was a Marine and he was on leave. Him and his wife were divorced and they had kids. She lived in Sacramento and he wanted to be able to host them at a home while he was in town. So he booked us for 3 weeks. His kids came and stayed with him on and off. But it worked out really well because I think we booked it for like $130 a night, which was, I think, double what we were paying for our condo in Mexico. It basically paid for our entire trip. But at the same time, he was able to book it for $130 a night, which was much better than he could get for any hotels in the area. And again, he was able to cook his own food. He created a really nice environment for his kids while they were with them. So I think if there's any such thing as a win-win, then Airbnb gives you those opportunities. So fast forward to April 2018, we had driven by Bridgeway Lakes for the very first time, and we loved the homes that were out there. We randomly saw one that was for rent and decided we wanted to start renting a home out there. So we looked at the home a day after we saw the sign, we signed the lease. And we had like 2 weeks before we needed to move on in. We were planning on packing up our house and we said, let's again list it on Airbnb. We'll take our time. The goal was to get a long-term renter into the home at one point. But Airbnb did so well that we ended up listing the home for those 2 years, and it's actually still listed. We just really enjoyed the amount of profits, talking to the people that rented the home. And so and also I think a big thing is also being able to get into the home every few days, weeks, or even months, so that if there was any repairs or anything that needed to be made, we could go in and do that. So I think it's in better condition than it would be had we rented a traditional 12-month lease to anyone. Fast forward to June 2019, I had a coworker who actually had a front unit and an ADU in the back. I helped him find the house a few years ago before he purchased it. And he saw how well our Airbnbs were doing. And he literally said, I'm moving out. I'm going to move in with either a friend or my parents, and I want for you to list my home. I was super hesitant. He had played around about doing it for a while, but we actually finally went forward. We decided on a split. I furnished and got it all ready. And it's been on Airbnb for a little bit over a year now. And both units are doing really well. This is a front unit. It actually has the travel nurse in it at this moment in time. And this back unit is a traditional Airbnb. And then, so let's see, fast forward. So again, I know we talked about Airbnb arbitrage. So we really tried, or I really tried to call different homeowners. I established an LLC, so I have a website, Sac Stays. I was really trying to get into kind of the arbitrage method. And as you all probably know, Sacramento isn't the most, I guess, progressive when it comes to technology or business ideas, and just kept on hitting roadblocks when it came to attempting to list people's homes, even though I had a really strong history of being able to take care of homes, and I was doing it myself. So earlier this year, we moved forward and we purchased a fourplex. So you saw the numbers on that fourplex. And personally, we've gotten appreciation from ownership. We've gotten cash flow from ownership. A lot of the cash flow that's come in from the Airbnb have gone towards upgrades on the building. And had we had traditional tenants in the building, I don't know if we would have had the flexibility to move as quick as we have when it comes to a lot of the electrical work that we've done, potential plumbing work that we've done, and then the landscaping work. So moving forward, I figured it'd be cool to just do 10 tips for getting started with Airbnb if anyone was interested. So my very first tip that I put on here is supply and demand outweighs location. So especially here in Sacramento, there's not a whole lot of listings, and they're actually starting to decrease, or it did decrease since COVID started. So at one point, location might be something that's huge, but I know people in Antelope, people in Elk Grove, people in a lot of suburban neighborhoods that are doing very well through Airbnb, not just the city center and the core out here. My big thing is going in with the proper mindset. So every time I get a booking, I think of it as someone staying in my home and allowing me to, whether it be pay down principal or make upgrades in exchange for the service that I provide them with. So I think mindset is huge when it comes to being a host. Um, Cleaning is huge. That's like the one non-negotiable when it comes to Airbnb. First impressions are everything. So I always have my Febreze, and that's what we spray before we walk on out. Just in case there's something that we missed. I think someone walking into an amazing smelling home does wonders for impressions. Don't leave valuables in the home. If there's anything that you can't live without, then don't leave it in there. I think that goes without saying. I've always used self check-in, and I definitely recommend people using self check-in, whether it be through a smart lock or lockbox. Um, the reason why I really like self check-in is because I send my guests the access information. I don't have to be there. We can be wherever we want to be. I send the guests the access information. And on that message, there's a lot of information regarding the home. And I know that if I was there in person with the guest that was checking in, I'd skip over or forget a lot of different things. Next, I just don't accept short weekend stays from locals. With the amount of stays that we've had, those always seem to be the toughest when it comes to like cleanups. We've actually had a party. I know everyone dreads the Airbnb party, but we haven't had any since. I think that was within the first, I think, 3 months of hosting. But those are always like our dreaded guests. I always say don't lower prices if a guest requests something or a lower price. To me, that just means that they won't value the home. So if someone asks for a lower price, I usually reject it, and I don't allow them to book it even at the listed price. Because the last thing I want is for them to pay what I had it listed as and then write a bad review or say that it wasn't worth what they spent. Because in their mind, I don't think it will ever be. Get the proper permits and licenses. Just control the narrative. So our listing is in Oak Park, and we've been listing for 3 months now. So it's on 2nd Avenue. It's not far from the Med Center. And for our very first few reviews, the location was getting marked down. If they're guests from major cities, it wouldn't happen, but you could definitely tell that if people were not from being very close to the city center, they would mark it down. One of the things that we did was we created our guest book, and we went over like the history of the home and it being the first home that we had with our kid and the diversity of the neighborhood. And I think when people started to notice that, it definitely changed their point of view on places. They'd walk to Old Soul. They would get to know the neighbors. So that's why I say always control the narrative on your listing. Of course, communication. So we communicate with guests after they've booked, the day before they check in. Once they check in, depending on the length of the stay, we check in with them while they're in the home. And then we also check in with them after they've checked out to see how everything went. And then last but not least, for reviews, I always push for getting reviews and getting them quickly, especially when you're very first starting, because those reviews play a role in where you come up for Airbnb searches. And then last but not least, I always put down to either respond to um, all of your reviews or none of the reviews. So I started off with not responding to any of my reviews. And I think when I got my very first bad review, I wanted to respond to it, but I didn't want to come across as only responding to bad reviews. So to this day, I still haven't responded to a review publicly. I've messaged plenty of people privately and gotten feedback, but if you look at my reviews, you won't see me responding to anything. Let's see. So 4 common questions that I get: are you still getting booked after COVID? And the answer is yes. So I think statistically in the Sacramento area, we've seen about 20% less listings than we saw last year. The years before that, we were seeing probably 25 to 30% more listings. And I think it's, again, because when COVID hit, people were just in positions where they didn't want for that to happen again. A lot of people got out, which, again, as I said earlier, decreased the amount of supply. And there's still a decent demand. So I think year over year, even though we've seen 20% less listings, we haven't seen as much of a drop in terms of demand for people looking for places, or at least I personally haven't. And then I also see in the future supply potentially decreasing. Again, I think that a lot of landlords are looking for something that's a little bit more conservative. And if they're able to raise their rents and get someone locked into a 12-month lease, then I think a lot of them are. It talked about how much you make through Airbnb. I would say we almost double our monthly rents had we done a traditional 12-month lease with some of our renters. I talked about location. You don't have to have I guess what's considered traditional good location, being in the city center. Of course, you don't want for your area to be crime ridden and things like that. But again, demand kind of outweighs the location right now. And then what about parties? So the one party that I have had that I was aware of, it was someone's 21st birthday. They were local. They stayed for one night. And they posted all of it on Instagram. So I was able to find it and then report it to Airbnb. Let's see. In terms of why I host, I know a lot of us have lived through 2008. And I know a lot of us have been waiting for something like 2008 to happen. I think that if we did wait in terms of buying properties, we would deplete all the appreciation that there has been since 2008. So I think with continuing to purchase, especially at the prices that people have been purchasing at, it's important to have tools for being able to pay your mortgage. So I think of it as a video game, level 1 through level 360, getting all of those payments in. In terms of with security, I know traditionally people look at short-term renting as risky, having multiple people in the home and things like that. I think COVID has somewhat changed that. My wife, she is a landlord-tenant attorney, and she's seen so many different landlords and property owners whose hands are tied when it comes to COVID for traditional renters. That I don't know if I don't know what the stats are, but I don't think that long-term renting is as safe and secure as it has been in the past. So I think that there are a lot of benefits to short-term renting. If I have a travel nurse here for 90 days, they have they have income coming in. They don't want to stay any longer than they've been staying. So I guess that's just my opinion on that. I really like, I'll jump back. I really like having tools and options. So I have all 3 types of renters on some of my properties. I have short-term renters. I have what I call medium-term renters, which are more like travel nurses and 90-day periods. And I have a few long-term renters. I think I really enjoy having the diversity of each of those. So that if something does happen, I'm still in a good position. And then cash flow and hopefully freedom. So our fourplex, I definitely think we probably overpaid or paid more than we should have had we wanted to just do it as a traditional rental. But with having it on Airbnb and the amount of cash that's been able to come in, I definitely think we've been able to put some more into repairs than we would have, which has helped with the value. At one point, we'll start doing more principal pay down, which will help with the equity, and then potentially cash flow while it lasts. who knows how long we'll really be on Airbnb. It'll be nice to one day be in a position where we just turn into traditional renters and I don't have to worry about it at all. So I think it's super important to verbalize your intentions. And that's what I decided to do here. So I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm definitely looking to locate investors. I think probably over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've seen a lot of different properties that I know would do well on Airbnb. But personally, we still don't have that year worth of cash coming in from our last unit. And then also we would be on our fourth home. And that fourth home we've reserved for the home in the school district that my son is going to go to, as opposed to an investment property. As much as I'd like to put it into a next investment, I think that my son's education and place where he's at is a little bit more important. I'd like to start doing a little bit more consulting with Airbnbs. So I don't think anyone can't not learn how to do Airbnbs, but I also know that there are a lot of people where time is money, and spending the time to go through the parties and the lessons and things I've gone over for the last few years is time that a lot of people don't have. Let's see, co-hosting. So again, I've seen a lot of units out there. I know that there are a lot of people who have in-law suites. I know that there are probably people who have master suites that can be accessed through the exterior of a building. So just putting it out there that there's potential for people to create cash flow and even list a place and be able to pay their monthly mortgage with just a few nights through Airbnb. I'm working on a course, and that's what I told Sergey. I definitely think you can look up things on YouTube, but a comprehensive course, I think, will be a much better use of people's time and resources. And then I have my real estate license, but I still haven't hung it with a broker yet. A lot of times, or when I've spoken with brokers, there's a lot of hoops. I think brokers in general are pretty conservative. There's a lot of different hoops to jump through, and I'm not sure it's worth the time and resources as of right now, but definitely still open. And then last but not least, I hope I didn't bore you all too much. Does anyone have any questions? Let's see.
What'd you pay for your fourplex?
$559. And so here's what's crazy about hold on, let's see. How do I stop sharing? New share. Oh, there, maybe pause share. Screen is being recorded. Let's stop the recording. And
You want to stop sharing?
yeah.
All right, here, I'll link it up.
Okay, so I'm sorry, who was it that asked about the fourplex?
That was Jake.
Jake. Hey Jake, we paid $559 for the fourplex, but the fourplex is a 1,400 square foot fourplex. So each unit is about 350 square feet. Everyone's always surprised when we tell them how small it is. So again, I don't know if it was very attractive to most investors, but considering the amount of cash flow that we can bring in, and we pay for all utilities. So I don't think it was very attractive to most people, but again, we have the potential. We're paying for all of our expenses off of the 2 Airbnb units. If we get to 4, then it'll bring in even more cash flow, and we can do principal pay downs. We can do so many different things with that I think we'll be in a really good position. And it's on B Street in West Sac, which between the I Street Bridge, the waterfront happening, there's a huge development happening around the corner. I just think it's a area that has a lot of potential appreciation, regardless of what the market does.
Hey, Bobby, so when you said there's not too many, I know the market is hot in Sacramento. You said there's fewer listings. Are you referring to meaning there's more buyers right now in Sacramento? Or can you clarify a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so on Airbnb, they give you like quick stats when you look at different days. And continuously over the past few years, it will say something like more people are looking for Airbnbs than they were at this time last year. And then it'll also say something like there are 25% more listings at this time last year than there were 25% more listings at this point this year than there were last year. And so over the past 3 years, this is the first time that I've seen it where it says there are actually less listings available on Airbnb right now than there were last year. Again, because I think a lot of people, when COVID hit, decided to switch to much longer term renters, which has decreased the supply.
What do you
Hey,
do about cleaning, and how does it work to hire? I assume you have a cleaning person.
So initially, I had a crazy schedule. So basically, my job is 5 minutes away from the house, our very first house in Oak Park. And so what I would do is at 12:30 every day, like on the dot, if there was a checkout, I'd run on over to the house, and I had this routine of like throwing all the linens and everything in the washing machine. I'd put it on the 30-minute like extra hot cycle. I'd clean for 30 minutes. I'd take those linens, I'd put them into the dryer. And then I would start a next set of the comforters to have those washed. I'd go back to work for a while, and then I'd run back over to the house for 30 minutes, clean for 30 more minutes, throw the comforters in the dryer, put the dried linens on the beds and everything. And then like the very last 5 minutes of the day, I'd run over, put the comforters on the bed, and then send the guest the access information. But yeah, now we do have a cleaner, and they're able to take care of all of the units. But they still never clean to the expectation that I have. That's a continuous problem. So I mean, I'll go through and I'll do spot checks every now and then. I've gone through a few different cleaners. I try to make it extremely profitable for them, for the units, but again, I mean, I think it's just business in general. No one takes care of your baby like you take care of it.
Bobby, did you have to apply for a conditional use permit for any of your non-owner occupied Airbnb rentals so that you can exceed the 90-day limit of a short-term rental?
So the unit that I'm co-hosting, my coworker did. I got away with it for my unit in Oak Park for 2 years with the owner-occupied. The owner-occupied option, and then we've switched to what I call medium-term rentals at that location. The amount that we're spending to clean and just when COVID hit, it opened up. I'm totally drawing a blank on the nursing Furnish Finder.
Yeah.
So I learned about Furnish Finder and listing on there. So it's just been, we don't bring in at that, our 2-bedroom, 1 unit in Oak Park, we were averaging probably $3,400 a month. And we have someone in a lease now at $2,900 a month. So there's a $500 difference in cash flow, but it's nice not to have to worry about that unit at all. And my studios are significantly more profitable. So.
What is the process like to rent to traveling nurses? Is it challenging to find those people? Where do you list? Because I have apartments right now and don't want to do Airbnb, but contemplating those medium term, but I don't want to invest in the furniture until I know kind of what the path, how easy it is and all that.
Yeah, so I guess mine is the opposite because I started off with short-term rentals and then moved to medium-term rentals. So we already had them furnished and everything. Right now I have it listed on Furnish Finder, and that's the only place that I've looked for medium-term rentals. I guess the tool that I have is having Airbnb until I get the numbers that I want for a Furnish Finder. Right? I don't get a lot of hits from Furnish Finder, or at least traditionally didn't. Because I do think it was priced a little bit higher than other listings, but all it takes is one person to be interested. So there's no real risk for me to not have it booked through Furnish Finder, if that makes sense. I can always make money through short-term rentals. And then when someone's willing to pay the price that I've set for a medium-term rental, then I go ahead and I switch it on over.
And how long does it typically take for somebody to rent via Furnished Finder?
I've done 3. So since COVID, this is my 3rd contract with the nurse. Both of them, I mean, it's a huge range. Some people will message you like a week before and they just got the contract. They're looking to move in as soon as possible. But I think, so it ranges. I've had someone, I think it was 2 weeks. And then we actually signed a lease for our last one, I think 30 days before. So in between 30 and 15 days. But people are already reaching out for some of my listings where leases are expiring at the end of December and early January.
Got it. And so do you cancel those Airbnbs if someone last minute wants to rent for the medium term?
No. I update Furnished Finder as I have Airbnbs rented, and I don't allow people to rent too far out through Airbnb. That's also one of the things that really came from COVID was I would be like 60 days booked, 60 days out. And then once COVID hit, basically my calendars were wiped clean, but people still rent. It's kind of like a huge leap of faith. Like I think most of my units, I might have a few, at least through Airbnb, that are booked up to like the next 2 weeks out. But most of them, I mean, I might have people checking out probably in the next 5 days and basically not projected to bring much in at all. But somehow, some way, people were like waiting until the last minute and then they're booking now. So that was a huge difference between before and now. COVID, I had places booked out for a while, and now it's almost like maybe 2 weeks out at the most.
And Bobby, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just curious how long you allow people to book out, like 60 days or?
No, not even. I think most of my calendars are open. It all depends on, I've set different term lengths. So example, at my fourplex, I have one that I ask for like 10-night stays. And that one has the calendar open for probably 60 days from now. But then the other unit there, I definitely ask for a lot more on a nightly basis. I allow 3-night stays, and that one's open for probably the next 30 days or so.
Is there a reason why you limit the future booking?
Reason why? Mainly because I don't want for someone to say, if I open up my calendar all the way through, I don't know, the middle of January, the last thing that I want is for someone to book it, say January 1st for like 2 weeks, and then it'll eliminate my possibility of being able to get a booking for, 90 days or so. Usually what happens is people reach out to you directly and they'll say, hey, I'm interested in booking this for longer than your calendar is open. Is it available? And then I'll say yes or no.
Okay. Another quick follow-up question. So thank you so much for talking about the arbitrage piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I think at the end of January, they're going to lift the eviction moratorium. I don't know. I mean, I think that actually may allow landlords to reconsider arbitrage, right? Because at that point, they want to be able to regain some of that inventory. I mean, what do you think?
So you're saying that once they lift the moratorium, that landlords might switch over to short-term rentals?
Well, I was thinking. Well, no. What I was thinking is, I mean, a lot of people aren't paying right now, and they're going to have to find a way to get them out. And if I wanted to do a sublease, don't you think that some landlords will actually be looking for ways to get rent and basically recover some of those losses? So the opportunity to sublease is going to be a whole lot better then than it is right now.
I don't know. I guess it just depends on how aggressive the landlord might be. And when you say sublease, you're thinking not from the tenant that's past due on rent, right? someone else coming on in. And
So where we are in Southern California, there's a lot of apartment complexes, and a lot of those people right now have basically people that are squatting, right? So they're going to have to evict a lot of folk. I'm looking at potentially going to those complexes and be like, hey, I'd like to sublet 5, 6, 7. I'm just, magical numbers, of your apartments. Wouldn't they be more willing to do that because they're going to be hurting?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm really curious to see if January 1st, what happens, because it seems like we're, as a country, living for the next 2 weeks out, and then something always ends up changing.
Yeah.
So who knows? I mean, a lot can change tomorrow, right? Like literally tomorrow or in a month from now. I don't know. I think maybe I think it's a possibility. There's so much uncertainty everywhere right now.
Okay, thank you.
I think the other question is also who generally, even pre-COVID, has it generally been easier to sublet from mom and pop owners or from property management companies, right? And my guess is that it was probably easier to work with mom and pop owners. And I think what you're referring to is property management companies, right? Where generally they would probably shy away from subletting because they're more stringent on their requirements. And so it's definitely interesting to see if they may be more open to that, or how their criteria will change for who they lease to, and whether they'll allow subleasing.
So what I will say though, I don't know if you guys have heard of I think there's like Hey Alfred, there's Sonder, there's some of these like really big, highly funded almost like startups that are doing Airbnb. And from what I heard, like some of them had like state of emergency clauses where they were able to get out of leases. I think there might be a lot of property managers that, even if you're coming with a big name, and like some of these startups were like funded by multi-millions of dollars, and they ended up breaking leases and not continuing once COVID happened. So I don't know, there might be some hesitation when it comes to property owners, or even large rental places, because all of those guys talk. And then the only other thing I was going to say, when it came to arbitrage, I think what was really nice, and why I'm glad that I got denied of so many of those master leases, was when I thought about like not making any money through COVID, I was willing to sacrifice a lot more to keep a home that I owned than I would have had like deciding on if I was going to keep food on the table for my family or continue these master leases that were out there. So I don't know. I'm definitely go towards the ownership or co-hosting because it's worked well for me. But I think there's a lot of potential for master lease agreements. I just think the markup is really tough on some places. Some studios right now are renting for crazy amounts of money.
What's the split that you have on the co-hosting?
We do a 80-20. So it's really, my coworker, he doesn't want to have anything to do with any of the Airbnbs. He just wants to see the profit. So basically we have it set up in Airbnb where 20% goes to me, 80% goes to him in an account that he has. He pays his mortgage out of that account. He pays PG&E and SMUD out of that account. And then once a month, I send him an invoice if there's any type of like additional expenses related to the house. So yeah, I love it. He doesn't question anything that I do. He knows I have integrity. So some months there's nothing extra, others there are extra things, and he knows I'm pushing for making sure we both make as much as possible on the co-hosted units.
And how much time would you say you spend actively managing projects right now, your properties?
That is a good question. Not a lot in terms of like the studios, just because it's so automatic. Like my cleaner gets the invites automatically when I get a booking, so I don't have to worry about that. I have templates for all of my messages to guests. They also have, there's like Smart B&B, and there's some other systems that people use for automating messages, which I just haven't hopped on track with. But I literally, when someone books it, I send an automated message letting them know. I'll send them the access information on their day of booking. If they have questions, I answer them. And then as soon as I get the alert that the unit has been cleaned, I send the access information to them. So I do the spot checks, and I've been spending a lot of time over in West Sac because we've been doing a lot of upgrades lately, but it's not a lot of time at all.
And I guess this may seem strange, but I feel like I hear a lot about sort of like regulatory uncertainty in the Airbnb world. Does that concern you, or are you kind of like, well, you could convert to long-term rentals if anything goes?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's, I mean, like I said, for the fourplex, I've been able to put so much into upgrades that I think we're good. The units look really good in the first place. We still have the tool of the medium-term rentals, so traveling nurses, even if we wanted to lower the price a little bit, and then we'd still be okay if we switched to long-term tenants as well. But yeah, regulation, that's another reason why I kind of avoid the arbitrage, because if worst case scenario happens, the units that I'm co-hosting with, that my coworker, he has all of his furniture, he can do whatever he wants with the units, and I just won't get my 20%, which I don't necessarily really bank on in the first place. So yeah, but regulation is definitely something that I don't know, like Tahoe, they went through a time when it was really tough. I know San Diego is really pushing. Hopefully Airbnb goes public soon, so I'll have a whole bunch of lobbying money to get into people's pockets to limit the amount of regulation.
Where would you say are good areas for Airbnb in Sacramento?
So right now, I think every place is somewhat of a good area. Again, because Sacramento in general, if this was a Bay Area, there's just a different mindset. If this is LA, it'd be a different mindset. I think you get a lot more entrepreneurs, a lot more people that are progressive and willing to jump on these things. But Sac is usually like 10 years behind. And there's a few people that are doing a lot of hostings, but not a whole lot.
So there's no limitations in Sacramento, like there's no regulations.
No, all of my nurses that have stayed in Sacramento, like the Oak Park area, they work in Roseville, they work in Carmichael. None of them actually work at the UC Davis Med Center or Sutter Memorial or anything. They just want to be near City Center. But then my Airbnb, I mean, I have patients that stay at the house or who have stayed at the house. I just met someone, he has a house in Elk Grove. He has ADUs. He has 2 ADUs and a pool, and that works out well for him. There's places in Antelope. Yeah, I mean, I think I'd always, if I were to look at a property, I'd look at worst case scenario, which is a long-term tenant. If it'd be profitable there, then it'd probably be profitable as a medium-term rental or furnished for a nurse, and then it'd probably definitely be profitable as a short-term rental. But I'd say like start there long-term and then move on up.
Awesome, thank you.
Hey, Bobby, and just to clarify, so is the concerns about regulations, does that generally apply to rentals under 30 days?
Yes, I think so. I would have to, I know my permit's getting ready to expire and I need to know these things. But I think so. I don't think that like my travel nurses, I mean, they do full leases and everything. I don't think that there's nearly as much regulation when it comes to them.
Yeah, because my thought is, if let's say if someone's considering doing short term, but then you always have to have a backup plan, right? What if regulations change or make it harder to do short term? You're purchasing a property, putting debt on it. What is your backup plan? So one option is switching to a traditional rental, which may make it tougher to have any cash flow based on what the prices are. But if you're able to just switch it to a monthly or an over 30 days type of rental, but still furnished, and I'm not aware of any regulations or restrictions on renting something month to month that's furnished, then that can be a pretty good backup plan, because essentially you're switching to the route that is less I guess challenging or time consuming, right? And with all the cleanings and all the turnover.
Yeah. I've definitely, if I don't know, I guess maybe I'm a little risky when it comes to like offering maybe a little bit more, at least with our fourplex, offering a little bit more than what a traditional renter would have paid or a traditional investor would have paid. But again, I think that having that catch-up period and having the amount of cash flow that can come from short-term rental is, even for a little while, whether it be paying down principal, putting money in reserves. There's all sorts of things that we can do to capitalize off of that cash flow for now, as opposed to spending all of the cash flow on things that aren't adding value to the property. So I guess it's probably super important to be disciplined in that aspect. I saw something in the chat. It was, there it is. Okay. Short-term rentals. Francis, are you running into problems, or is that a pain point that you have in mind before expanding?
So not really running into any problems, but yeah, for the city of Sacramento, at least in my triplex in the zone that we're in. So the city has divided Sacramento into different zones, and it might be, the regs might be different in different zones, but where I'm at, short-term rental is defined as a rental under 30 days.
Got it.
So yeah, the longer-term rentals to nurses, 3-month rentals, those are fine. Those are just really treated like long-term rentals. You have them sign a traditional lease like what you're doing, Bobby, and you don't have to pay a transient occupancy tax to the city. It's really just like a long-term rental. But anything under 30 days, you have to pay the transient occupancy tax. And in my zone, I have to pay an additional 3% assessment of gross revenue, which is a marketing assessment by the city. So there's an additional little fee that I have to pay. But even considering that, with the Airbnb income, it makes up for more than makes up for it. So
yeah, that was one of the big considerations on where we bought the fourplex, and being in West Sac in Yolo County. So if Sacramento's 10 years behind, then I guess YOLO is closer to 12.
Really?
So we couldn't find, and still haven't, and I'm not going to ask for much regulation when it came to YOLO County and their renters and short-term renting.
So West Sac is a completely different county.
Yeah, West Sacramento's YOLO County,
totally
different city. And so any and everything that we had to look up for Sacramento is totally different. And again, we couldn't find much at all. So that definitely increases profits with not having the complications that you run into Sac. But we're a mile from the Golden One Center, so you still get the same benefits.
Yeah.
Bobby, you mentioned automation, and I think one of the platforms that automates messaging. You're saying you're not using them, or I was in general going to ask if you're using any kind of tools, or if you're just relying on having a good system without much tools outside of Airbnb to manage.
Yeah, I'm not, especially because as of right now, I mean, we have 2 medium-term rentals. We have our traditional rentals, and then we just have the 3 studios that are really getting rented on Airbnb. I've tried them. I think there's like Your Porter, there's Smart B&B. There's a few other ones. I think it really takes away, or I don't know if I was able to add enough artificial intelligence into those for it to seem personable enough, or as personable as I'd want for it to be. Because a lot of times I get a message and they say why they're staying or things like that. So I'll input my template which Airbnb lets you do automatically, and then I'll add something to it. If they're telling me that they're there for work, I'll say enjoy your project, or, I think that those add to a guest experience and add to my reviews, and therefore hopefully make me come up quicker for search results. I just I don't feel like I have enough units to sacrifice the personability at this time. I know that people encourage you to learn them now as you're smaller, which I have tried to do, because as you grow larger and you want to automate it, it will save you some time. But just at this time, I think my templates have been enough. Have you used any of them, Sergey?
No, I haven't. I've learned about one of the last ones you mentioned. Is it Smart
Smart
B&B?
B&B?
Yeah,
Mhm.
I heard about it a couple of weeks back. Was looking into it, but I agree with you that I think generally it makes more sense if you are either on a different time zone, like with the property on the East Coast, that's 3 hours difference. So when we initially put it on Airbnb, I would have to, on days that someone's moving in, I would have to wake up, 3 hours earlier our time and make sure the current guests leave on time, the cleaners are in there, and so you're trying to do it all remotely. So it just adds extra stress. So I think in those situations, just not to miss any messages, it might make sense. But I haven't used them, and I agree with you that generally, if the goal is to have less turnovers, I'd rather have longer stays, maybe earn a little less profit. But in essence, if you consider how much time you're putting into it, you're making a lot more, per hour or per whatever. So in that case, it may take a lot longer for you to actually need the tools if you're doing less turnovers.
Yeah, we went to Europe last year, and it was a nightmare, like remembering to send the instructions and making sure the cleaner was done. So no, I can definitely see it. I
Mhm.
think personally, I think a route that I would probably take before I automated some of those things would be to get like a virtual assistant. I think that you can kind of contract them out of country, and then I don't know, build a really strong relationship with them, spend a decent amount of time with like responses and making sure that they can almost mimic how you would respond, and maybe even go that route if we got to enough units. But yeah, I don't know. I just haven't been able to emulate the personability um, through any type of automated system. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I just looked up your listings from bobbystays.com, and I'm curious why the 2 bedrooms in Oak Park, why one of them's only 81 a night and the other one's like 128 a night.
So mainly location. Well, both of them have medium-term rentals in them right now. So I don't know if I have any days open. Wait, which ones did you look up? Because I have 3 in Oak Park.
Oh gosh, I'm not sure now. One of them was $81 a night and it was kind of up close to the health center, and the other one was 128 and it was farther down south, close to the freeways.
Okay, so I have 3 rentals in Oak Park. So the nicest one, which is the house that was owner occupied by me and my wife, we remodeled it. It's literally like less than a mile from the med center. And that one usually goes for the most. That one's the one that's rented at $2,900 a month right now. And then I have my coworkers, which has a main house, which is a 2-1. That one's 600 square feet, so it's a fairly small 2-1. And then in the back, he has an ADU. So I think you probably saw the ADU that's available right now, and that one goes for about 80 a night, at least from a guest perspective. It's less than that from a payout perspective.
Okay, so it was really just kind of the quality of them.
Yeah. Mine is on 2nd Avenue, and again, really close to the Med Center, and his is on 33rd, much closer to 12th Avenue. And in Oak Park, there's definitely pockets and groups of areas where you get what you pay for in general, but there's just places that I think are more attractive than others.
Thanks.
any more questions on the topic of furnished rentals or Airbnbs before we jump over to networking and breakout groups?
Does anyone have any Airbnbs that they're thinking about listing, or any locations that they're thinking about listing on Airbnb?
Oh,
Not
sorry.
yet.
One other question. So you said initially you had rented out your place when you were going on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
You listed it as an Airbnb. I guess, I don't know what my question is, but just that seems a little intimidating to me to go from living in my house to then listing it on Airbnb. And it seems kind of surprising that anyone would actually rent, like be your first renter for something. Okay. So
Yeah, so I mean, Airbnb 3, at least my mindset of Airbnb 3 years ago was a lot different. Like, we had our same towels and sheets and everything. I mean, and that's what Airbnb was, right? Like, that was the foundation of Airbnb, which was like being able to bring in income from your living space. And now it's kind of morphed into, like, we have white sheets and white towels, and our guest experience is a lot different than it was. But like 3 years ago when Airbnb started, I mean, we had the same mixed towels. We had prints all over our sheets. My wife, she's managed properties in the past. That's what she did while in college. So we both had a really good idea of like what clean was, but a lot of people don't necessarily know what clean is. There might be like your living clean, but we knew what like guests were expecting. And we had done a deep cleaning before we went on vacation because we didn't want to come home to a dirty house. But that's where I think there's potentially value in a course, or at least that's why I'm thinking about doing it, because there were so many things that I did 3 years ago that I would probably that terrify me of doing now, that people can learn on their own, or they can jump straight to knowing and learning some of these things. But no, it was kind of weird, but at the same time, like, we literally went to Puerto Vallarta and had meals and everything for 4 weeks and didn't spend a dime. So I don't know, the weirdness kind of went out the window when we got all of those things paid for. So.
Well, Bobby, you've done just a fantastic job. It's a great success story. I hope that works for you. It's been probably a lot of work. You've got a lot of experience now, but I think a lot of us probably have looked into it. I know I have many times, and you have to ask yourself, is it worth worth the extra income for all the work? Because getting started, it's difficult. I mean, it's a lot of things processes you have to have in place. Having a wife that is I think you said, property management. She's got experience in contractors and contracts and certain things like that. But when you start, most of your homeowner or landlords are not going to want to sublet to you because it leaves them open to liabilities and eviction problems, and but you've done a great job. I hope that work keeps working for you, and you're doing a great job. Great experience.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I think long term, I think we've been able to, like, our water heater at the Oak Park house went out like last month, and like we literally were able to get it fixed within a few minutes out of reserves from the Airbnb account. So I think whenever it is that we do decide to switch on over to traditional rentals, we've been able to do enough upgrades and fixes on the properties that I think it'll be smooth selling. So.
Well, don't stop doing what you're doing. No use to turn them into longer term. If everything you're doing now is working, just keep rolling with it and acquire more doors.
More doors.
More doors.
All right, Bobby, since we're recording this, we send out an email to everyone on the meeting, and so if they want to reach out to you, they'll be able to do it that way. But for those who may not be on the meeting and may come across the recording, what's the best way to reach you and if they would want to connect with you in the future.
Oh, I did pause the recording.
I'm recording on my end, so that's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So few options, biggest or easiest is Bobby at sackstays.com. So SACSTAYS.com. If you go to sackstays.com, you'll be able to put in messages. But yeah, that'll probably be the best, easiest option.
Okay, awesome. So my suggestion is that before we move forward, any final questions or comments? All right, so I'll stop the recording for the presentation so that we can move on to networking. Oh, actually, I almost ended the meeting. There we go.